Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Asio Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, brought to you by Asio Gear with Don Higgins. I'm Terry Peer. Don, let's kick it off. Opening day in Illinois here, and we haven't been in the woods. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's been hot as can be, which has kept me out of the woods. But yeah, I seen a figure the other day that in the last, I think it's 150 years, there's only been 9 Octobers that had a day over 90 degrees. And this would be the 10th October in 150 years with a day over 90 degrees. And it's not, weather's not supposed to break until about the 7th or 8th, I think it is, here. And then we're supposed to get a cool down, where highs are going to be in the 70s. So I'm probably not going to hunt for the first week. And that's probably the first time in my lifetime, well, since I was a little kid, that I did not hunt at all the first week of season. And rarely do I miss opening day. Usually I go opening day, just to kind of break the ice, and then I may set out for several days, but I almost always go in the first couple of days, but not this year. I'm setting out a week. And, I talked about that a little bit in a video I recorded yesterday, and we probably should talk about that video a little bit. So my target buck is actually not on my farm. It's on a permission property. And where I was at on that permission property, it's out in the middle of a section surrounded by ag fields. And for me to get back where I was at yesterday, I was going to have to walk through about 3/4 of a mile of standing crop. And a few years ago, I wouldn't have hesitated. I'd have done that. But now that I'm a little bit older, walking through that much, even beans, is not the easiest when the bean plants are, kind of laying over and such, and corn is even worse. So a couple days ago, they got the crop harvested where I could walk across a crop field that had been harvested to get back to where I wanted to go. And, I talked about then not hunting for the first week or so. And I was kind of just going through my process of hunting this permission farm, and I know there's a target buck on it, and I need to get a stand or two hung. I got one stand that's been on this farm for a long time, since I've had permission for a long time. Haven't hunted it in years, but the stand is in a good location, but I just felt like there's something better there. And that's what I was doing yesterday when I went in and made that video. And there's a couple of stand sites I found, and I hung some Wise Eye cameras while I was there. So, if anybody's interested, we're going to post those videos throughout that chase on Chasing Giants TV. And I think the first one's coming out, Tuesday?
Tuesday, yep. And we're going to call them Chasing One Specific Buck. That's what I named the thumbnail on it. So we'll just create a series of vlog style videos. This one's going to talk, you're actually down in the creek bottom showing where you're putting one of the Wise Eye cameras and why, and what the strategy moving forward is. There was one piece in that we can dive into a little bit on the podcast and unpack a little bit. And you mentioned that you waited till right when they harvested to go in there. And was that because there was already the disturbance of all the machinery and everything else, and probably blew what it was there? This isn't a big woodlot by any means. And then you mentioned that you were going to come back and hang the stand when it was really windy. So explain those two kind of bookends of your decision of when to go in there and hang those stands.
Yeah, I wanted to get in there right after the harvest because there'd been a lot of disturbance, with the combine and the other farm equipment in there. This time of the year, the deer are fairly used to hearing that. All the combines are rolling in my neighborhood. In fact, by the time this podcast comes out, there's probably going to be almost no soybeans left in my neighborhood except for some double crop soybeans that are still a little bit green. Soybean harvest has just been crazy this week. But with the disturbance they make, I wanted to get in there right after that disturbance. I rode my side by side to this property and drove back on it. Left the thing running. I did not go into any of the cover more than about 10 yards. There was a couple things I wanted to check. One was that creek. I wanted to see if there was water in that creek, and also the cover is so thick that I suspected that creek bed was being used as a travel corridor, especially by a bigger buck. He's just going to have a whole lot easier time traveling down in that creek bed than trying to get his rack through a bunch of bush honeysuckle thicket. So, and I found plenty of sign in that creek bed to know that the deer are using that as a travel corridor. But this time of year, there's a lot of disturbance going on in a deer's world. Things are changing. The seasons are changing, but you got all that farm activity, and it's going to go on for another month or so. This is a time of year where you can do a lot of damage on foot, to your hunting area as far as human intrusion. But being on some sort of piece of equipment or motorized vehicle, even a truck, if you can scout from your pickup truck, just looking out the window, driving the edges, you're going to disturb a property a whole lot less than you are walking that same area. And if people remember back to my first 200, I had a wind change when I was hunting that buck, and very similar situation to this. I had one stand on the property, and boom, season's open. I'm hunting out of that one stand in this case, and I see a giant. And that stand is good for a couple different wind directions. That particular stand was good for a south or southwest wind, and that was it. Well, we had a wind change. I hunted one morning with a south-southwest wind, had a wind change that day. It changed around to straight west. And I couldn't hunt from that stand, so I drove in my truck, came across the field, had the windows down, the radio blaring as loud as it'd go, truck bouncing or rolling through corn stalks, making all kinds of noise. And I parked that truck right next to the tree where I put my stand up. I left the truck and the radio going the entire time I put that stand up. Got done, drove away, went to town, had lunch, came back about 2 hours later, and slipped into that stand. And within 20 minutes of slipping into that stand, I had that 214-inch buck at 20 yards. Now, I didn't get a shot because it was so thick. I didn't dare try to poke an arrow through, but it just shows that this time of the year, those deer are used to hearing traffic from, all kinds of farm equipment, and you can get away with a whole lot more from a vehicle than you can on foot.
Yeah, especially in open ag ground where you're at. I mean,
right.
It's more what they're accustomed to in your neighborhood, with pressure on the farm. I look at some of the tracks that we have permission to hunt on about an hour from you. Nobody's on that farm the entire year except for during planting and harvest and spraying. So those are the times that the deer kind of get accustomed to it. Any other pressure outside of that at a different time of the year, it's danger.
Yeah, and I know there's going to be people that are going to watch that video and they're going to say, "What about zero human intrusion and blah blah blah?" And the big key there is I was just barely getting into the cover, and literally I was 10 yards from the field edge the entire time. I was not poking into that cover whatsoever. I found a couple different locations, which they can watch the video and I'll describe them there, for potential stand sites. And the other thing that you mentioned, Terry, was going back, and I had a stand with me. I had a stand with me, and I intended to put it up, but I found two locations and I couldn't pick between the two. So what I did was I hung a Wise Eye camera at both locations and just backed out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back on a day, hopefully when the wind is just blowing hard and covering up my noise and everything. And I'll slip in there and hang a stand and slip out. But windy conditions are good for doing a lot of work this time of year in season. because you got the sound obviously of that the wind is making rattling through the leaves or whatever, but also the movement of that vegetation. Um, if it's a still day, and you're moving through, it doesn't matter if it's on a field edge or what. It's really easy for a deer or other critters to pick up on that movement. But when the wind's blowing everything here and there, that movement is not near as noticeable. And where these locations are is right on the edge, so I think it's going to be fairly easy to slip in there and hang a stand without disturbing the place.
Would there be any reason, whether it's multiple wind directions or different conditions, that you would put a stand in both locations? If
Well, I won't right out of the gate. The only reason I would is if I get busted at one stand.
Okay,
Both of these locations require the same wind direction,
so
so
there's not an advantage over the other one as far as that goes.
right. If it was a situation where I needed one wind for one of the stands, another wind for another one, I'd go back with two stands and I'd hang them both. And I guess I still might, depending on what I see on these cameras in the next few days.
Yeah,
But
interesting.
more than likely, I'm going to pick one or the other.
Okay. Well, interesting. Well, make sure you follow along this series of vlog style videos called Chasing a Specific Buck on Chasing Giants YouTube channel. There's a lot of content going there. We got before we go to the Asio break, your grandson Walker's hunt video released last Thursday. And we really appreciate the people encouraging and making friendly comments to Walker, telling him congratulations. I know he'll get I don't think he's on there, but I'm sure that he'll appreciate it when his mom or dad tell him that there was a bunch of people telling him congratulations.
Yeah, and I certainly appreciate that as well. Grandkids are my life. Once you get to my age and you start thinking about the end of the road and what you're leaving behind, and the grandkids are the legacy. So it just appreciate that I was there when he shot his first buck on this farm. Hopefully he'll remember it forever.
There was a comment that you mentioned. I hope people will go watch this video. It's only about a 9-minute video. It's not very long, but there was a comment that you said in there that this property is one of the tightest managed properties in North America when it comes to the whitetail herd, and you said there's more important things. And I think that was I just appreciated that as a father, that pretty much whatever was going to walk out. There might have been one or two that were off limits for him that were going to be passed, but the fact that you wanted to teach him more about the art of management and the habitat and everything, that was more important than which specific deer. So I really appreciated that as a viewer.
Yeah, and I'm kind of torn at the moment between taking him out and letting him shoot anything that walks out and making him earn his first giant buck. I feel a little bit guilty pulling him off of certain deer, but at the same time, I know that I could ruin him um, by just letting him shoot a giant, at a young age.
Yeah.
He's going to have a lot more years left on this farm than I have left. He's going to have the day where, he's likely going to be the one running it just based on what I know of my grandkids, my three grandsons I have now. I would say Walker is likely to be the one that is serious about deer hunting and takes over the management of this farm. So I think it'll mean a whole lot more to him if he kills his giants based on things that he did rather than just going out and sitting in grandpa's blind and shooting one that way. So
I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, but I think your thought process there makes a lot of sense. My daughter's first buck was an absolute buster. I mean, it scored in the mid 150s and only had a 14-inch spread, if that tells anybody, what it was. And she had no idea what she did. So like I said, I don't think it's wrong for somebody to turn their kid loose. I don't think there's wrong for people to hold back a little bit. The important thing there is that experience and that memory that you had with your kid was greater than any management practice that you had on it. So make sure you go to Chasing Giants TV YouTube channel. Check out Walker's first buck on Don's home farm. I think it was his third buck that he shot. Is that right?
I think so. He shot a couple in Indiana, and
But the first buck on Don's home farm, make sure you go check that out. Let's listen to a spot from Asio real quick. Make sure you go to their website. All of their new fall line stuff is in stock and shipping. I got my new Asio hunting boots this week that I'm really excited about. You guys are going to want to check that out if you're looking for hunting boots. These things are built for whitetail hunters, and trust me when I say that, you need to go to the website and check it out. We'll be right back.
Asio Gear was forged by apex predators. Our two camo patterns are built from nature's most lethal hunters and designed to vanish anywhere in the whitetail's range. Our Raptor pattern draws inspiration from the unique feather patterns of a great horned owl, while our Rapix pattern is derived from the patterns of bobcats, coyotes, mountain lions, and wolves. But camo's just the start. Every detail of our gear is engineered for bow hunters. From our patent-pending bow hunting collar to our premium fabrics that keep you quiet, dry, and dialed in all seasons. Asio Gear is made to last, with our lifetime warranty standing behind every stitch. Visit Asio Gear and use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off your first order. That's ASIOgear.com.
Well, Don, we're going to fill the second segment of today's show with a conversation about how you've developed this farm. And unlike anything else, the management plan that you've put together with bedding and food, I just said it a little bit ago, it's probably one of the best, tightest to manage properties in North America. But did you ever think that your efforts would attract an emu?
I'll tell you what, it takes a lot to surprise me anymore. But last Saturday, I got a surprise I was not expecting. Quite a story. Anybody that follows me on social media probably seen the photos, but I'd been out working on the farm, came in for lunch, and I was in here in the house, and Robin took our little dog out to the yard to go to the bathroom, and she went out, and she hadn't been out probably less than a minute, 30 seconds maybe. And all of a sudden I hear her screaming for me, no, no. And I'm like, I could tell by her voice that something was wrong. And so I dropped what I was doing and I ran outside in my socks onto the driveway to see where she was. I didn't even know where she's at, just see if I could find her and what the problem was. And I run out of the garage onto the driveway, and there in our front yard stands an emu with our little dog sitting there barking at it. And Robin
like a 6 or 7 pound dog.
Yeah. And the emu is like, as tall as I am. And and Robin is afraid to go grab the dog because she thinks the emu is getting ready to attack it. So anyway, we get the dog, and the emu is just following us around. I mean, it's not afraid of us at all. And, it had its mouth open, like it was panting. And we could tell it was thirsty. So we got a bucket and filled it with water, and it came right up there and drank out of the bucket. So I took a couple pictures, and then I posted it on social media and saying, who's missing an emu, And this is the power of social media that, I mean, literally within 30 minutes, the owner of this emu was at my house. And in the meantime, I went back in the house, I finished eating lunch, and I went down to the farm. What I had been doing was drilling some clover seed into my pasture. The pasture's really dry because of the weather we've had, and the cows have ate it down to just about bare dirt in a lot of spots. So I thought it was a perfect time to drill in some clover seed. And I was doing that. And so I go back down, I'm working on that again. And the guy that owned the emu, he lives about 7 miles from us, of all things. I'm texting him and giving him my address and all that. Well, I look up, and here comes this truck with a livestock trailer on the back, and in front of the truck is this emu running down the road. Well, he gets that emu turned into basically our farmyard where our old house used to be, and he gets out. I'm still on my tractor going back and forth drilling that clover seed in, but I'm watching him the whole time, and he gets out with a lasso, and he lassos that stinking emu around the neck and kind of half leads, half pulls it back into the stock trailer, and away he goes with it. So it was quite the unexpected event at our house last Saturday. And there's a local meteorologist for the local news station who's got quite a following here in Central Illinois, and he had been following this emu. Had been out for a few days, and people had been getting pictures of it and in their yard or whatever, and he had been following the chase for this emu, and he ended up posting the picture of that we got of that emu, and I got one of Robin filling the bucket with water and the emu drinking out of it. But it was very unexpected to walk out of your house to your wife screaming, and there's an emu in the front yard. I'll say this too: it was lucky for that emu that his owner came along and got him. If he'd have been running through my woods during deer season, we'd had a real problem.
Well, I was just getting ready to ask you. Luckily, he caught him up by the pasture. What would you have done if that emu would have run back into the sanctuary, and the guy showed up and wanted to catch it?
Well, I would have let him. The last thing I want is a stinking emu living in my sanctuary all fall. But I would have done everything I could to get him out of there. Believe me.
Holy smokes, what a story. I can't imagine Robin out there with your all's little dog barking at this thing. Because some of those emus get mean. I don't blame her for being worried about it.
Well, this one wasn't mean at all, and it also wasn't scared of people. It'd follow you around.
It was probably hungry and thirsty if it had been out for that many days. So,
well, it was definitely thirsty.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move to the Higgins hot seat, brought to us by 360 Blinds, and this kind of piggybacks on the emu story a little bit. I want you to talk a little bit about when you go in, and whether it's consulting or you're on your home farm, and we put a plan together to make the best deer habitat. How does that is a chain reaction to every wildlife out there? So, it's not just deer are not the only thing that benefits from it, and use examples from your farm of stuff that you've seen. And obviously it goes in waves based on your predator population and all of that. But as you go in and manage, using your farm as an example, how does it basically create habitat for all critters to thrive and be better?
Well, white-tailed deer are very adaptable, and they will thrive in just about any kind of habitat. You could create habitat for upland game birds, pheasants, quail. You could create waterfowl habitat. You could create any type of wildlife habitat or habitat specific to any type of wildlife, and deer are going to utilize it and benefit from it. But in creating deer habitat specifically, a lot of other wildlife are going to benefit from that as well as the deer. And here on my farm, it's been crazy some of the things I've been able to witness. I was just thinking the other day of some of the things I've witnessed on this farm, and when I started, there was a few pheasants in the neighborhood, not a lot, but we built the pheasant population up to. I mean, there were times where I would see 40, 50 pheasants in one flock out feeding in a soybean stubble field on a frosty morning from my tree stand or something. I've seen the fur bearer population explode. Mink, for example, I've witnessed numerous mink while sitting in my tree stand, going about their business. I think we talked a few podcasts ago about gray squirrels showed up. How the first gray squirrel decided to pack up his nuts and go across the 6 miles of open ag field is beyond me. But at least a couple of them did, because they're here in numbers now. Quail, I've seen the quail population. It kind of peaks and drops. I don't know if that's based on predators or weather, rough winter weather wipes them out or what, but I've had situations in some years where there's just a lot of quail here. The predators are always here. Coyotes are you can't wipe the coyotes out. They're just very resilient and keep coming back. But I think that the guys like us that are creating habitat, we sometimes get bashed because people say we've got a deer farm, or we're growing deer instead of hunting deer, and on and on. But we benefit so many other species of wildlife. It's unbelievable, and it's part of, in my opinion, it's part of giving back instead of just taking. I mean, um, there's guys that they just buy a hunting license and they go out and they shoot deer, and that's certainly their right. I'm not bashing them in any way, but they're basically taking from the resource. One argument that was thrown back at me on social media when I said that a while back was that, yeah, but they're buying a hunting license and that hunting license supports the resource. Well, if you live in the state of Illinois, you know how corrupt our system is. And you buy a $25 deer tag and you're lucky if 50 cents of that actually went back to benefit the deer herd in any way, shape, or form. But the guys that are doing habitat work on any scale, it doesn't matter if they're just planting a little quarter-acre food plot. That little quarter-acre food plot is benefiting rabbits and who knows what other species of game. So the habitat thing is every bit as addicting as the hunting is. And I understand that some folks don't have the financial means to have a piece of property they can manage or even lease a property. They just got to hunt where they can for free, whether it be public or permission properties. I totally get it. I've been there. I lived that for decades. A couple of first 2 decades of my life as a hunter was that way. So I get that. But for those of us who are blessed with the opportunity, that the habitat work becomes as addictive or maybe even more addictive than the hunting part of it. So here I sit, in hunting season open and haven't even been to the woods to sit in a stand or a blind yet. But in the spring or whenever, when it's time for habitat work, there's no way that I let the weather stop me. If it's too muddy, I'm out with a chainsaw or something. If it's planting conditions, I don't care what the temperature is. If the soil temperature and the time of the season is right, I'm not going to let a hot day keep me in the house from going out planting. That habitat work is just addicting.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just a cool story. Now, obviously, nothing that you did with your habitat, I think, can be directly tied to an emu showing up. I think there's probably a little bit of luck with that, but funny story. For those of you who are watching, I put a picture up on the screen of the thing running around Don's yard. So I would have loved to see. You ought to pull the security camera footage up of that. You got cameras all around your property. That would be hilarious if you pulled the security camera footage up of that. So anyway, we'll be right back after a spot from Midwest Land Group, who sponsors our segment with listener submitted questions. We got 5 good ones for this week.
Does your real estate agent know the difference between a rub and a scrape? Or did they ask how many deer you caught this year? At Midwest Land Group, our agents evaluate the land the way serious hunters do, because it's exactly who we are. From surveys, soil types, floodplains and easements, to timber quality, tree stands, access, and food plots. Whether you're interested in buying or selling, work with an agent who speaks your language. Visit MidwestLandGroup.com to connect with one today. Midwest Land Group. Buyers, sellers, land. Connected.
All right, the first question comes from Mike Miller from Apple Creek, Ohio. It says, Dear Don and Terry, thanks for the great podcast and the faith you show. I started hunting when I was 12 years old in 2000. Back then, the majority of hunters were not nearly as effective in harvesting deer, and there was little habitat management occurring. Listening to podcasts and reading magazine, it appears that was the golden age of giant bucks, especially in Illinois. Do you think this was an inadvertent form of the buck management you practice today? Hunters are shooting more immature bucks and not being as effective at harvesting promising 3-year-olds. Thanks and God bless. Well, without a doubt, hunters have become more effective at killing bucks, and there's a number of reasons. There's advancements in the weapons we use. There's more liberal hunting seasons and regulations. Crossbow being one example. Straight wall rifle cartridges being another example. You're right, though. Back about the turn of the century, the Illinois deer herd was probably in about as good a shape as it was ever going to be in. However, there was some regulation changes that at that time that were starting to come in effect, and I don't remember the exact year some of these happened, but the I hate to call it the crash, but the downturn for the Illinois deer herd was probably more due to regulation changes than anything. You combine those regulation changes with the deer hunter today is way more knowledgeable than he was 25 years ago. The knowledge we gained from the internet, from podcasts like this. Back in the day, all we had was a magazine that came out once a month, and sometimes only every other month. And certainly they were educational, but not to the degree that it is today, where a deer hunter could get online and he could be reading new information every single day, for the entire year. Where with a magazine, I'd read through a magazine in a day or two and be done with it, waiting on the next issue. And lots of research has gone into it. Lots of people have become very proficient at killing mature deer, and they've shared their knowledge. And that's been huge. Today's average deer hunter is way more effective at filling his tags than back at the turn of the century. When I look back, I'm always thinking of events in my life to kind of tell me about that period of time. And so I killed my first 200-inch buck in 2004. And, I can remember what things were like in 2004. I remember what I was driving, the vehicle I was driving. I remember that I had one trail camera. It used 35 millimeter film. 2004 to me doesn't sound like that long ago as a 62-year-old guy. To a guy that's 30, 2004 seems like a long time ago. A lot has changed since 2004. And something else I think I mentioned a time or two on this podcast is I listened to a sermon, and it's been a few years ago now, and that sermon was on technology. The preacher or whoever was giving that sermon tied the advancement in technology into that sermon. It wasn't about technology, but he tied it into it. And he made a statement that there has been more advancements in technology since 1973 than since when Christ was on the earth. So from whenever Christ was on the earth to 1973, there was actually less technology advancements than there was from 1973 to that day. And it's probably been about 5 years ago now that I heard that sermon. So that 1973 date has certainly shifted up to probably 1980. I graduated high school in 81, so I can relate to that year and what was available to us then. And I mean, any type of mobile phone was unheard of back then. I remember the first bag phones that you would plug into your cigarette lighter, and they used some sort of cell service, very limited. Didn't work all that great. I remember the first one that we had would have been it would have been in the late 1980s, probably 89, 90, somewhere in there, maybe even later than that, actually, because
That was early if that was the case.
it was actually later than that, because I remember when we got it, my youngest daughter was already born, and she wasn't born until 91. So it would have been in the early 90s, probably 93 or so, 92, 93, somewhere in there when that first bag phone. And look at the phones today. I mean, mine's sitting right here, on the desk, and this thing is look at all it can do. It's our phone, it's our clock, the watches we used to wear. Nobody wears a watch anymore, hardly. It's a calculator, it's a camera, it's a GPS device. You can use it as a plat book. All the different apps. We used to have to buy a new plat book every few years to tell us who owned land, and it was only good for one county. So a guy like me would have a plat book for all the local counties, so he knew who to go knock on the door to get permission to hunt a property. It's all right there at your fingertips. And if my grandpa, who passed away, and he would have passed away in 1992, if he would come back and see this thing, he would be absolutely amazed that I carry this little thing around in my pocket. I can dial up a guy in China and be instantly talking to that guy in China. I can send a picture through the air to any person on the planet with this little box that I have here, and all the amazing things this will do. The advancements in technology since the turn of the century, which was referenced in this question, has been so extreme that it's absolutely changed the effectiveness of deer hunters, and mainly because of the transfer of knowledge. This little box allows me to transfer my knowledge with everybody else on the planet, but it also allows me to gather knowledge from all kinds of other folks on the planet. And then once I've learned it from someone else, I share it. And there's no secrets anymore. Somebody comes up with a great idea, whether it's a product or a hunting technique or whatever, boom. It's kind of like the emu we just talked about. 30 minutes after I had this emu in my yard, the guy that lost it 7 miles away knows where I'm at and knows his emu's here, and he comes and gets it. How long would that have taken 25 years ago? I mean, by the time that guy would have heard the emu was at my place, it would have probably been 6 counties away. So it's an interesting thought, but there's a lot of factors that have come into play. We've become way more efficient at killing deer, and because of that, we kill a lot more young bucks. And it's just the way it is today. And that's why I think land management, land ownership among deer hunters is becoming the rage, is because if you want to hunt good big deer, mature deer, you're going to have to pretty much either own or lease. And the lease, a lot of times the money you spend on a lease would just about, make your annual land payment or go a long ways towards it. So our society's changing, and in turn, the deer hunting world's changing. Okay, the next one comes from Clint Lawrence from Mattoon, Illinois. Says, Don, I had what I believe to be a 4.5-year-old large-bodied 8-point on my property last season that I wanted to target and remove. Unfortunately, a poor shot was taken on the buck, believed to be low, and he survived. Fast forward to this season, and that same deer, now considered to be 5.5 years old, has put on inches as well as 2 additional points. Do you often see mature 8-point bucks add many inches as well as points? If I were to pass this buck this season and he reaches 6.5 years old, could he potentially gain even more antler size? I ask this question because I've always been under the impression that a mature 8-point typically wants to remain that way. Thanks for all the information you provide, and I hope you have a successful and safe season. Well, Clint, the buck that you're describing is not the norm for 8-pointers. For a buck to still be a clean racked 8-point at 4.5 years old, and then add inches as well as more points, I'd say it's not super rare, but for him to really explode into what I would consider a true giant is pretty darn rare. Most bucks, if they're a smooth rack 8-point at 4.5 years old, are probably going to remain that way, but they're all individual. Now, I will say that as a buck ages, he has a tendency to throw on those little stickers and non-typical points, but is it going to be enough for you to let him go and take a chance on him getting even bigger next year? And that's a question only you can answer. Um, I, I forget who it was. I think it might have been Lee Lakoski said that if a buck makes a big jump in antler score, you should probably go ahead and shoot him because he's never seen a buck make a giant jump in antler score twice in his life. I have to agree with that. I've never seen a buck make a big jump and score twice in his life. He may make a big jump and then remain at that level. He may even add a few more inches, but he's not going to gain 30 inches in 1 year as a mature buck anyway. I mean, he may gain 30 inches from, say, a 2-year-old to a 3-year-old or a 3-year-old to a 4-year-old, but if he's already 4.5, 5.5, and he adds 30 inches, the odds of him doing it again are very, very low. He may add 5 or so, but it's very unlikely he's going to do it twice. So every mature buck is different, just like every person is different. We talked about the analogy of comparing these bucks to people or guys, and there's the guy that in school at graduation, he was the shortest kid in the class, and come back at the 10-year reunion or 20-year reunion, and the guy's 6 inches taller and 100 pounds heavier than he was in school. So, and the guy that was, the biggest kid in the class for most of your school years, come back to that 10-year reunion, and there's several guys that have outgrown him. So, bucks mature at different rates, just like people grow at different rates. And yeah, there's some tendencies, and that's about all we can go on. So, you're going to have to make the call on that buck. I don't know what else is on the properties that you hunt. And so for me to give you advice on whether to shoot him or let him go is going to be next to impossible. You got to make yourself happy. And, I had a friend of mine, Joe Chambers, Chambers Custom Guns, makes 1911s out in Nebraska, made a statement to me not too long ago about a buck. And he said, one thing to factor in when you're deciding whether to shoot a buck or let him go is, can you accept it? If you pass him and somebody else shoots him, will you accept that, or will you be mad at yourself for passing him? And that's a great way to put it. And I think that's great advice to you as well with this particular buck. If you let him go and someone else shoots him, but he doesn't get a chance to grow next season, are you going to be happy with that, or are you going to be mad at yourself because you did not shoot that buck? So great advice from Joe that I'm just passing along.
Okay. Next question. Oh, my computer stalled. Hang tight. There we go.
So this one comes from Dan Fritz from Murdoch, Nebraska. It says, "Hi, Don and Terry. I own a farm in southeast Nebraska where my cousin hunts coyotes with greyhounds a few times a year, typically taking several. You've mentioned the negative impact of dogs near deer sanctuaries. Does the benefit of removing coyotes outweigh the disturbance to deer? Looking forward to West Elk's consultation this spring. Proud Gold Star brother and active military member, Dan." Dan, first of all, thank you to you and your family for the sacrifices that you guys have made.
Absolutely.
It's folks like you. The rest of us can't even really comprehend that kind of sacrifice. So thank you for that. In regards to your question regarding the dogs, that used to be really popular around here. I'm thinking back probably 15 or so years ago,
Really?
20 years ago. Yeah, there was guys that would have these greyhounds, and they would go out and hunt coyotes in the winter when the crops were all out of the fields. And these dogs would chase a coyote sometimes for miles. And so they had to have crossed numerous properties they did not have permission, and most people didn't care. I mean, they was killing coyotes, so a good thing. But you would have a group of trucks with dog boxes in the back, and they would just be all over an area, sitting along the roads waiting for the dogs to come out. And I think they chased them with coyotes. And then if I may be wrong here, and if I am, somebody can certainly correct me in the comments, but I think they would put the greyhounds on that coyote to chase him down and tire him down. And then they'd have some other kind of a kill dog that would come in and kill that, grab that coyote by the throat, and once he was all wore out, and just kill him. They most of the time they were not shooting these coyotes, if I understood it right. And I had a friend that had some of those greyhounds, so I've talked for 5 minutes and not answered your question yet. So dogs running, using these dogs to run coyotes out of a deer sanctuary. To be honest, I think that does more harm than good. Yeah, it's good to kill those coyotes, but I think that the harm that it does to the sanctuary is a much bigger negative than just allowing those coyotes to live. And I certainly don't allow them to live, but I think a much better way to control coyotes, and what I use on my farm, is guys with thermals at night and a call. A coyote, he's about as worried as a big buck is, a mature buck. It's hard to get him out in daylight to expose himself, but under the cover of darkness is when they come out. And it's very effective to use a call to call these, and you don't even have to go into your sanctuary whatsoever. You can be a quarter mile off of your sanctuary out in a wide open field at night. And a lot of these guys are shooting, from the road ditch. They'll go out 100 yards or so and stick their caller, and they call the coyote to that location, and they're sitting back at the road ditch with their thermals, just watching for these coyotes to come in. And I'm not insinuating anybody's doing anything illegal. I'm not 100% sure what, obviously every one of these guys does, what their methods are, but they're not in the cover is the big thing. They're calling these coyotes out of the cover into wide open ag fields in the dark and shooting them. And I promise you, one good coyote hunter with a good thermal is going to kill more coyotes on your farm than running those greyhounds through there every single day of the week all winter long. It's just way more effective. So, not trying to cause any issues with you and your buddies or whoever that has these greyhounds, but I absolutely would not allow it to happen on my place. And with that said, I'm going to guess that there's been greyhounds in the past chase coyotes through my property, because back in the day, I used to see them on the roads around my neighborhood, and I didn't cause them any grief. I appreciated what they was doing, killing these coyotes, but a much, much more effective way is thermals at night with a call.
Yeah, it's I don't know of any situation with dogs running that's got a positive impact. And how many trail camera pictures or times have you been in the stand and seen a coyote and a deer in the field coexisting? I mean, they're in the woods all the time together. It's just, the coyotes hunting the fawns, and, or a sick or wounded deer. But I mean, I countless times I've got pictures or sat in a tree stand and seen them coexist together.
I actually got a picture that I'm going to send you, Terry, to put on the screen here. It's a picture. I had the camera on a pear tree. The pear was dropping fruit, and under this pear tree is a coyote with a pear in its mouth and a deer eating pears. They're on opposite sides of the tree, but both the coyote and the deer are under this tree eating pears at the same time in daylight. So, they know where they stand. Those coyotes very rarely can kill an adult mature deer. It's going to take a wounded deer or a special situation for them to hurt your deer. Now, with that said, in an ideal world, I don't want any coyotes on my place. I just think that's an impossible ask. It's never going to happen. So we limit their numbers as much as possible. But the funny thing is that a deer knows the difference between a coyote and a dog, and I have no idea how. I remember back in the days when I had my captive deer, a dog, even a little, 7-pound dog, a little yapper, would cause those deer more stress than a coyote walking by. When a coyote would walk by, those deer would just maybe flare their tails and stand there and watch the coyote. But when a dog came by, it didn't matter what kind of dog, how big, it didn't matter what the dog was doing. If it was a dog, those deer were running from end to end in that pen trying to get away from that dog.
Yeah. And we've both seen coyotes blow deer out of a field too. They've ruined several hunts for me, so
Yep.
Not to say that doesn't happen either. All right, let's get the next question up here.
So this one comes from Brian Karstensen from Sauk Rapids, Minnesota. Hope I said that right. He says, Don, I'm purchasing an 80-acre farm, half of which is tillable, and the other half is mature white oak woods that used to be an old cow pasture. Since I raise cattle, I plan to fence in most of the field and seed it for pasture, leaving some areas in the back for food plots. But what are your thoughts on running cattle through the woods for a short period of time in the summer? Let's schedule a few weeks in June to help keep the pasture from becoming overgrown, especially with buckthorn. Thank you for answering my question. Well, Brian, I feel for you because I'm in the same boat. I got two interests, deer and cattle. In fact, I got some heifers coming in from South Dakota this week, some bred heifers. So um, I want those deer and those cattle separate. I think that running those cattle through your deer woods does absolutely nothing to help the deer woods. Even controlling some species like you've talked about the buckthorn. I don't see the benefit, or the negatives far outweigh the positives. Maybe is a better way to put it. When I create a sanctuary on any property I'm consulting on, or a property I own or manage or whatever, I want that sanctuary to be a sanctuary 365 days a year. And yeah, we'll make an exception for one day a year on my place, and we'll go in and do a shed antler hunt. We may make an exception to go in and do some habitat projects. But even on those situations, I'm doing one shed antler hunt. I'm not going in multiple times to look for shed antlers. Do it once, get out. Put way less stress and pressure on that sanctuary. Habitat work, same way. If it's a project that I think would take me multiple days, I would much rather wait until I've got help, my sons-in-law or whatever, to be there and do it all in one day and then get out and stay out. Um, the more security that you give in your sanctuary, the more the deer and especially the mature bucks are going to relate to it. And I just I would not want to run cattle through my pasture or through my deer woods ever. I think the negatives are just too great.
Yeah. I think that there's ways you can use your cattle pasture strategically, just like you and Wes did. You know, Wes kind of did Higgins 2.0 over in Indiana, and I was watching the proof or the timeline of the first draft of his hunt for U-Haul that we're going to air in early November the other day. And he talked about how strategically he designed a cattle pasture just to reduce the likelihood that deer would be in that area to control where his scent would be. And it opened up another area of the farm that he wouldn't have access to normally. So using cattle pastures is a phenomenal way of not only gaining access, but also minimizing where deer could be on your farm and allowing, your scent to blow out. So, but yeah, got off on a sidetrack there with Wes's hunt, but there's ways you can definitely use cattle to your advantage, though.
Yeah, cattle pasture, like the male buck I shot back in 2020. I accessed that stand across the cattle pasture on my farm, and once I got into my tree, my scent was blowing back out into that cattle pasture. So they can both coexist on the same property. I just don't know that it's ideal for them to coexist on the same acreage.
Yep. All right, we'll get the last question up here.
This one comes from Brandon Trowbridge from Cadillac, Michigan. It says, "Hey Don, what size tractor would you buy and what implements would you get for a first-time buyer with 5 acres of plots? And how do you like the Wise Eye cameras?" Well, I like the Wise Eye cameras so much that I bought 2 more here recently. And I'm sure I'll be adding to my arsenal with more Wise Eye cameras. So I've been very impressed with them. In regards to the equipment, and then we've discussed this a little bit on here on the podcast in previous episodes, I think you need at least a 50 horse tractor. You can just do so much more with a 50 horse tractor than you can, say, a 30 or 40 horse. I think you want a loader on that tractor, a loader bucket on the front, and for a couple reasons. One, you can do a lot of work with that loader, but the other thing is it counterbalances the weight. When you put a heavier implement on the back, whether it be a sprayer full of water or a drill or whatever, having that extra weight up front will help hold those front tires down on the ground instead of picking them up. So I think you want at least a 50 horse tractor. I think you want a loader on that tractor. You definitely want a mower. You're going to need a mower for mowing your clover or whatever. Just a lot of uses for a mower on a property. You're going to want a sprayer. I would recommend a minimum of a 50-gallon sprayer, one that hooks onto the 3-point on the back and has a little PTO driven pump. I'd stay away from the electric pumps. If you've got a tractor with a PTO, that is absolutely the way to go when it comes to a sprayer. And then I think I would invest in a drill. You may not at the beginning. Drills can be pretty expensive, but ideally the G series drill from PH Outdoors, I absolutely love that thing. I plant everything on the farm with that except my corn, and I have planted corn. It will work just fine with the corn. I just already had a John Deere corn planter, so I kept it and continue to use it. You heard me talk earlier. I was using that PH drill to seed some clover into my pasture. When we built our new house back in summer of 21, that fall when I seeded my yard with the drill. Broadcast some seed as well, but I used that drill to get some seed in the ground, and it worked way better than the broadcast seed. So I think that drill is going to save you a lot of labor, so you don't have to work the soil. You can get that seed down in there without working the soil. It'll cut down on the weed competition in your plots. So those are the big ones. I think you need a mower, a sprayer, and a drill. If you want to save money on the drill, you could get either a disc or a tiller, and then you could get some kind of a broadcast implement where you could broadcast seed. But that drill needs to be on your wish list anyway.
Yep, absolutely. I think different tractors have different frame sizes, I've learned over the years. And when you're looking at it, make sure you spec your tractor out from the beginning for what you want to do later. Because some of these tractors have really big tires on them and they look big and they cost $20,000 less, but they won't pick up a drill in the back. Or they don't give you enough loader capacity to do anything other than push some mulch around. So do your homework. You can even give a call to Grub Implement to our buddies Chad and Brandon that can help. Since they're deer hunters and habitat guys, they know the lingo and know what you're going to do. So whether you buy from them or not, they're in Northwest Indiana. And I guess that's technically not Northwest Indiana. Is that still?
It's on the western side of Indiana.
Yeah. But they do business with everybody around, and I like doing business with people that know what you're doing, what your end application is. If I'm going to go buy something, I want to buy it from a salesman that understands what I'm trying to do, so he can help me make those decisions. So, I recommend calling Grub Implement over in Western Indiana. But the problem is people buy these small frame tractors with big tires thinking they're getting a deal, and then they go to buy a drill or they go to pick up a pallet of seed or mineral and they can't do it. The tractor's just not strong enough. So there's a lot of consumer beware things that are out there that I think people need to be aware of.
Yep.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about, as we close up today, what's going to be happening this week on Chasing Giants TV. We got a busy week of videos that you're not going to want to miss. Obviously, it's Sunday when this episode comes out, but on Tuesday morning, the series of Chasing a Specific Buck comes out with Don and his target buck. Turning Point comes out Tuesday morning. On Wednesday, the Chasing Assurance podcast is going to air, and make sure you're aware that it has its own website now, where if you have a question or a prayer request or something that you want to connect directly with Dad, go to chasingassurance.com and he can help you through whatever you're dealing with there. And on Thursday, we have another hunt video with Josh Anderson that's being published. So make sure you're watching Chasing Giants YouTube channel. There's a lot of good content out there, and we're in hunting season mode, so a lot of hunting videos coming out. So outside of that, Don, I know Aaron Gaines has Sunday night prayer time this week. What do you got to close us out with?
Well, I'm waiting for the weather to change. The forecast shows midweek temperatures are going to drop at least 10 to 15 degrees, so that's a good thing. Low temperatures at night are going to be into the 40s, so I'm anxious to get out and sit in a tree. So by next week, I will be able to discuss a hunt or two. I want to throw out that I know people think that I target a specific buck and I will kill that deer. That's not always the case, and this is going to be one of those situations where this buck is going to be tough. He's not on my farm, so there's other people that hunt in very, very close proximity, maybe even on the same property where this deer is at. So it's going to be a journey and probably going to be a struggle, and there's probably going to be some frustrations, but we're going to video document that and show everyone the struggles. And so with that, I hope you guys are all enjoying time out in the woods. Keep your priorities in order. Use that time you're sitting in your tree to reflect and, think about any changes you may need to make in your life to get your priorities in order. Always try to encourage, especially younger guys, to do that.
All right. Take care, everybody.
God bless. We'll see you next week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Asio Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Hey, Chasing Giants listeners, Aaron Gaines with Sunday Night Prayer Time. I hope everybody's deer season's off to a good start. The Missouri archery season kicked off on September 15th, and I was able to harvest a really nice buck the first week of season here on my home property. Normally that doesn't happen that early for me, but I was able to pattern this buck and end up intercepting him as he moved from food to bed one morning. End up hunting him 2 mornings in a row. I was able to close the deal on the second morning, and again, just very blessed to harvest another nice animal. But for tonight's Sunday night prayer time, I want to talk about packing for a trip. And I'm not sure what packing for a trip looks like in your house, but in mine, there's a clear contrast between myself and the rest of my family. And for me, packing is simple. I grab a small suitcase or a duffel bag, usually my NRA bag. That's kind of my go-to. And usually I pack the night before we leave, or sometimes even the morning of, and it drives my wife nuts with my last-minute packing. But I just toss in just the essentials, toiletries, one outfit for each day, and I'm good to go. And I figured, if I forget something, I need it, I'll buy it if I have to, or just get by without it. But my family, on the other hand, takes a very different approach. The best I can tell, the packing process starts weeks in advance. Large suitcases come out, new clothes are purchased, clothes get ironed, they get folded, they get sorted, and then packed until each bag reaches the 50-pound weight limit. And they must weigh the bags, because every time we go to the airport, if we're flying for a trip, they certainly max them out at 50 pounds, but they haven't went over yet. So I think they're weighing them. They have to be. But anyway, you could argue they're definitely more prepared than I am. Looks like they're moving in, but somehow I still manage to get by with the basics. I got to thinking, in many ways, the Christian life is like packing for a trip. But it's not just any trip. It's a journey to our eternal home in heaven. And the good news is that we don't have to stress out about whether we packed enough or if we've remembered everything. Through Jesus, the essentials are already taken care of. Our salvation isn't something we earn by packing perfectly or doing everything right. And I want to read from Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 through 9. It reads as follows: "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. This passage from Ephesians is telling us that we are not going to earn our way to heaven through our works here on earth. So you may be asking, well, how do I get to heaven? Well, the simple answer is that whoever believes in Jesus will be saved. And if we look at God's word, there are two incredible promises that reinforces this. We go to John 3:16, and it reads, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." And then we read in Romans chapter 10, verse 9, "If you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved." So from these two passages, we can be confident of our salvation simply by confessing with our mouth that Jesus is the Savior and believing in our heart. So when Jesus died on the cross for our sins, our ticket to heaven was paid for. And all we have to do is pack for the trip. And so as we wrap up tonight for Sunday night prayer, I want to leave you with the following question. The question I have is, are you ready for the trip to your eternal home? And if you're ready, are your loved ones ready? So let's go to him in prayer. Dear Lord, we just give thanks to you for sending your Son to die on the cross for our sins, and just ask that you continue to guide us and open our hearts and just continue to be open to your word and live more like you. And for those Chasing Giants listeners that have not made that decision to accept you as their personal Savior, just continue to guide them and open their hearts to your word, and hopefully, they make the decision to believe in you, so they can make that heavenly trip someday as well. Just watch over us this week, keep us safe. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Everybody have a good week, and best of luck this deer season. Be safe. Thanks.